Welcome to Inside Scoop with Sean Emory. Every week we are examining something new, bringing you closer to companies, sectors, and themes. This recording should not be construed as a substitute for personalized individual advice from Avory Company or any guest on the show. This is for educational purposes only and not intended to make an offer or solicitation for any companies or securities mentioned. With that, let's get on with the episode. All right, we are live on Inside Scoop with Debu Chatterjee. He is the founder of Konfer, which is really around AI governance. You know, the AI scene is in full force today. I think one of the key areas that I think is often forgot about, and I guess specifically this week is more top of mind, which is more the governance around AI instead of just simply the use cases of AI. You have a background pedigree that is enormous. Head of engineering and platform and AI at ServiceNow. Founder of many things, and you were at FICO with a ton of data there. Everyone's thinking about how do you use data, how do you use that data to create real use cases in the world, but then also put this layer of governance on it. So I wanted to welcome you today. Tell us a little bit about who you are. I gave a little intro there, but welcome to Inside Scoop today.
Thank you, Sean, for inviting me. I'm really pleased that I'm able to share my background and my interests and what I'm doing today with a bigger general audience. As you mentioned, yes, I ran ServiceNow engineering for about 4 years, and as the head of AI, ServiceNow actually acquired my previous company called DX Continuum, which is a company for ML ops, right? As we know, ML ops today. So they acquired it to seed AI in ServiceNow, and today pretty much all of that, other than the generative AI which we announced this week, probably runs on the stuff which we built and we acquired and we did stuff for the last 4 or 5 years. So what am I doing now in this new incarnation company which we had launched a year ago? It's all about AI governance, and part of it is around helping people get trust and transparency about what is being used within applications which are the business units consume every day. And the interesting thing about the organizations is the organizations now need to know not only the applications and what they're consuming within and being built within their organization, but also like procured software. Like you may actually be ending up buying subscription software from outside which uses AI, but they use AI on your data and making decisions for you. So as an organization, you really need to understand that if I'm going for digitization, generative AI, improving productivity in the company and all this stuff, am I adding additional risk to the organization? How am I going to be confident with what I'm going to do with the AI initiatives which is now in progress or being launched within the company? So as soon as somebody starts using AI, they need to be thinking about it, and that also brings in the question of AI governance by design. In general, my general background is I've been an enterprise player all around. I've been in 15 years in the Oracle database group. Did some stuff in Informatica for a couple of years, and then FICO did fraud analytics before launching the first startup. So essentially, a very, very deep domain experience in data applications and enterprise software.
Yeah, no, it's obviously today's environment of data to AI to software to application. I mean, you sit right at the crux of all that, so you're well positioned from a experience standpoint. Talk about you started Konfer a year and change ago, more than that,
Exactly.
and today is the hype around AI. It's really coming to the forefront. It's consumer oriented and consumer grade, so that's my belief of why we're all hearing about it more than 5 years ago. Again, you were the head of engineering platform and AI at ServiceNow, doing AI years ago. I guess my real question for you, someone that's been in the war room for this stuff, is this really that groundbreaking moment that we've all kind of been waiting for AI? Because we study software, we study infrastructure technology, and we've been talking about AI for a long time. This is something more tangible, I guess, to the average day person, as it relates to AI. Outside of we don't realize, and you were mentioning it before, how it's personalized to us. AI is, providing an experience. We don't necessarily know it's AI. Think of your Instagram feed where you're scrolling through and, things are popping up for you, but maybe not for, your friend. And those are other versions of, AI. So talk about today. How, is this that groundbreaking moment, and how are you really thinking about generative AI as it stands today?
It is a big inflection point. In fact, it is moving from We always talked about democratization of AI and people being able to use a lot more of data to drive their decisions, but it still needed a significant amount of understanding of how AI models could be used, with what data to be used, and that is essentially getting reduced to more about for calling services, and the services like foundational models which are now offered as upper services, and they already have been tuned to a large amount of information, which would have been very difficult for normal, startups or smaller companies or individuals to have used it. So now the real democratization of data as well as usage is happening with the foundational models available and hosted by a lot of services as the foundation for doing more creative work in this space and applying it to a much larger set of applications. Essentially, unstructured data was available but was not consumed in a form which would be very useful for individuals as well as organizations. With foundational models and services, which is called generative AI. Actually, literally about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, we used to call them like question and answering models or machine reading comprehension models or search models and stuff, and they were compartmentalized into various more action oriented stuff. Now it's all getting clubbed under generative AI. Summarization, another example. We used to call summarization models extractive and abstractive summary. Now this is a generative AI which automatically do things for you based on the prompts you enter and the directives you give to retrain from the previous answers and kind of lay the groundwork for it. So you really do not need to know how these models should be built and what you can now depend on more on what being provided by horsepower coming out from the big companies, but essentially target them towards use cases which you wanted to solve for a long time, but you are not in a position to take advantage of the technology or the or the infrastructure which could have supported you.
And how important is data? A lot of people talk about, so you have these models that are built in some ways open sourced to the public. Developers can build on them. A lot of that is trained on, whatever it is, public data or non-public data. How important is data? I think from the investment standpoint, I think a lot of the perception, and in some ways, it makes a lot of, logic around it, which is the more data you have, the better you will likely be, in the form of AI. Now, at the same time, from our standpoint, it's the more unique data, the more data that you have that's different from others, that then you can, apply some model towards it. Is essentially the companies that will have some form of strategic advantage. Assuming there's an actual use case, not just data for data's sake and AI for AI's sake. But the concept of data, more data, unique data. How do you think about that from the lens of an expert?
Data indeed drives the decisions you're going to make, right? So the data depends on the context in which you're going to use. And I'll give you a couple of examples. For example, we used to have, we build chatbots, right? Chatbots are generic enough that they actually understand what you are asking and then convert that into a set of actions. And there's a turn and between different dialogues which is going on. But a chatbot for an employee will be very different from a chatbot for a customer, will be different from a chatbot for, say, operations or sales. Now, and it will be different for different companies. For example, a network. A network may mean network of computers, a network of providers, a network of salespeople. So the context in which you want to understand and how you want to train it is what the data is. So the data, has to be contextual to the problem you're going to solve. And you got to make sure that that data exists so that you get to the right set of answers you're looking for, and not having that notion of hallucination where the foundational models tries to fill in the gaps based on what data it actually has rather than the data which is more relevant to you for the context in which you're going to answer the question. The second important part of data is around bias, fairness, robustness, and so on and so forth, right? If you essentially always have data from folks who belong to a certain zip code or very rich in or as far as the income and wealth is concerned, then you're not able to answer, or you're not able to take care of the folks who are in the other set of category where the application will be used. So it could be folks who are in a certain age group versus a certain set of demography, or countries, even countries. Like if the product has been built or the training has been done primarily on data which you acquired from US or the United States where the most of the information available, it may or may not be applicable to a third world other countries like Africa, Europe, and they may have a very different notion of what's going on. So it is important to know what data the models were trained on. That is why foundational model companies need to become more transparent in what they have taken internally to create the models which are done. Because without that context, it's much harder to make the applications based on these large language models conducive and contextual to and appropriately applicable to the problem you're trying to solve. So the context, the kind of data you used, and whether it answers most of the information which you want to answer is something some people need to work on and either work with the third-party providers or internally to make sure that they are providing the right applications which can be consumed by their consumer groups which they are targeting.
Got it. And how do you feel about the thought around, jobs and, how AI replaces jobs? For one, I look at the company you're building in Konfer and I look at it and I say, without AI, there's no Konfer, right? Because there's no governance required to, build your company. There could be governance in other areas, right? But, in general, there's a problem still worth solving, where a company can, execute and build, the company that you're building today. But more broadly, outside of just, simply what you're doing, how do you think about the relationship between, AI and also, job functions? You've obviously been part of AI teams that have, tried to build things maybe for product, but also for, internal workings for, productivity, and, what that ultimately the ripple effects were that as you, developed product around AI.
So the product part, the product part is very topical. I do not think AI is necessarily always going to remove the number of job in the market. It's actually going to make jobs much more productive. I recently came back from my son's graduation. My son is in an art school, and his thesis was how 40-hour week came around after industrialization happened. And one of the key, one interesting fact I learned is that Henry Ford actually implemented 40-hour week in his factory because he wanted his own factory employees to have leisure time so that they could actually buy cars and use his own cars to go out and travel and have fun. And that would be one way of increasing the number of people who could buy his own cars, right? So essentially, having a structured 40-hour, having weekends and less thing that would allow people to get to be more. So if it's more productive in a 40-hour week, then you can get to spend other time doing something else, right? So I essentially think that AI will make people much more productive. A lot of the work which has been done in generative AI was something people are struggling with. Like, people's ability to solve a case when the notes are being passed around from one case agent to another case agent, and they're trying to solve it over a period of time. It actually affects their morale if they cannot do it. So now you have a better summarization of the case notes which are being passed around from one agent to another agent, allows all of these people working as a group to solve the things which is important for the company better and faster. So that improves the productivity as well as the individuals' morale of how they are helping the companies become more successful. The net promoter score of the company actually improves because their customers are happy. They get better feedback from the customers faster and everything else. So, essentially, generative AI and other places improves the ability to do work, and actually reduces the amount of friction between different organizations because they don't have to run the same processes multiple times. Like, for example, the work which we are doing, we have to work in the legal and compliance side of the house. We essentially want to ensure that the products that are being bought, the stuff which is being using AI actually follows the governance and controls which should be in place, which a normal risk management team or enterprise management team will set up, because bringing in AI adds additional risk to the company. Now, most of the information, most of the answers which are needed to solve those answer those control questions actually probably exist in the documents which are being produced inside the company. There could be sprint documents, there could be procurement documents, there could be design and test specifications and everything else. We can use AI to take those documents which exist today and read those questions using generative AI and answer those questions in a way in which pretty much say answer 70 to 80% of of the controls which are there in place, and you don't have to run these processes for every new act which comes into the organization, into the world. Like today, international standards exist across different nations, but states in US like California has AB 331, Connecticut has come up with a new. So states are going to be putting in their own acts. So all those processes and everything else can be run once, and people's productivity goes up. The collaboration between stakeholders go up. So everybody gets to be more productive and in a much more enjoyable and less friction way. So AI actually really helps people to do things better. Yeah, so some of things may be done differently, which means that people will get reskilled in working with these tools rather than getting away with people absolutely, because there has to be human in the loop. Without humans, they cannot make an objective decision. This is still not a human with an empathy and emotion in there that they can answer certain. They can take something, do it manually, and help a customer out when somebody is really unhappy with the results of what service they're getting, and so on and so forth. A probably long-winded answer, but there's so much to talk.
No, it's good. And when you think about the landscape, who do we're trying to think of, the infrastructure players, and in this day and age, you can start thinking of even like the Metas as infrastructure players, just given that, they built their own data centers, they've trained a bunch of models. They have their own language learning models out there that they open sourced recently. You obviously have the Googles, you have the, obviously Microsoft with OpenAI, and there's probably many others. Where do you think like the value really accrues here? Because that's infrastructure. Then you got some of the applications that may live on top of that. And that's some of what we're seeing today. Then you have the companies that are already, have built software. Think of like ServiceNow, which they're not necessarily, the infrastructure layer, but they're sitting here with a ton of, data and capability and, use cases around so many different parts of a business. If you just think about that, all the different, areas of, what we live in, where do you think the value accrues within AI specifically from your lens?
So from a perspective of service providers like Meta, Google, Nvidia, and other Microsoft and folks who are creating these large language AWS models and providing them as a service within the ecosystem, definitely the foundational services and the other libraries available are improves productivity and allows a lot more applications to be created. And that's where they add value to it, and they can do it at scale and can do it for a large number of people, customers, as well as sizes. But one thing which is lacking is probably the data on which many of these foundational models are being trained. They probably have to open source the data too, or at least allow people to have an ability to introspect them at the data so that they understand what is it being built on, how it's being built, right? So that is one thing. That is something which they have probably to think about, and then that becomes things around the proprietary part of it, right? How much of it is taken for open source, how much you are licensed for, where the copyright rules come in. Images have been are owned by many sources which may have been taken. Some of them could be individual images. People may have consent rights to it. GDPR rules may follow. There could be national and international data location policies. So it's definitely, there's a lot of work to be done in the space to make it really, in some sense, more transparent and available. And that is one thing which is lacking, which may reduce which may cause impedance in the adoption of many of the models and used in a commercial way, where you are absolving the company of the risk of using these models along with the data which is being used, because they come from places which are unknown to the users of these infrastructure. Of course, companies which are working as products which are then applied for and used by organizations, the organizations own the data. In that sense, like enterprise companies like ServiceNows and Workdays of the world, and they probably need the permission of their customers to use the data in a form which can be used by another person. So that's way different from use of the data on the things. So the value, but as an applications are probably going to be built by a lot of people. There's the whole bunch of startups which are funded. They will have their own ways of bringing out the applications, and that's where, and they will use as much tools and techniques available in the market today. which makes their, what they can bring to the market and to the customer cohort as quickly as possible. The time is of essence there, and ability to capture a large, or the mind share of a large number of people is going to be important for the companies to be the early movers and the early successors in this space. I hope that provides you a good insight into how these things will happen or evolve. And governance will come into a picture, because without governance, people will not trust and believe in what is being offered, and they themselves cannot provide the same level of interpretability or explainability about that people should trust the applications they are providing. Applications are what being consumed by individuals and businesses. So if applications cannot explain and tell that or provide documentation, then it'll become a big problems, and it'll become an even bigger problem when laws and acts like the EU Liability Act comes into the picture, and there'll probably be ambulance chases and on the road where if the documentation doesn't exist on how you have done it, then you may be liable to a larger set of problems and larger set of fines, even more than the 4% to 6% fines which the EU Act is going to set up. When and it's already become passed, so in another 12 to 18 months, companies will be fined on their revenues if they are not compliant to these acts and laws.
Got it. So talk about Konfer. Where are you guys at in terms of your journey of this business? What's the use case now? And I mean, we kind of know the use case, but more so like, how are people thinking about using you guys, and how are you thinking about developing your ecosystem or product portfolio for the use cases today? But more importantly, again, obviously you have a mental roadmap for the next 5-10 years of how this is all going to shake out, and that's not going to be a straight line by any stretch. But just tell us where you guys are at today, and what you're building.
Thank you. Absolutely happy to share what we are doing. So Konfer is the first end-to-end product which operationalizes AI governance and compliance continuously. So think about us as software which allows you to handle the proliferation of not only technical ways in which you build AI products and solutions, like digital stuff which is being internally, or using low-code, no-code environments, or using third-party services and foundational models, but also the ability for you to keep in pace with the regulatory standards coming out. All the different countries are different international standards. States are coming up with their own standards. So, just like a TurboTax, which produces your net payment or net tax, which is there at the state level or at the federal level, you answer all the questions once, and then you get either a refund or a payment out at the end of the calculation, which is just automatically. Konfer will help legal and compliance office folks create the process of governance, so they can create their own standards and the controls based on the templates which we provide. The templates which we will provide for the product will align the different acts and standards to what we think the controls should be. What are the kind of questions? For example, there can be a question around fairness, like, have you run the fairness test? What kind of fairness tests you've run? What are the kind of accuracy you've got? Do you have like subliminal effects inside fairness? Those are the interpretation which Konfer does of the acts and laws which are being produced. And interestingly, many of these questions are going to be will be common across multiple standards. So we can answer the question in an organization once, but then score against multiple acts. So at any point of time, you get a Konfer score, just like a FICO score, which talks about fiscal responsibility of an individual, how good the person is as far as the fiscal responsibility is concerned. We can now score the apps in an organization, or the apps you're procuring from a third-party software company, according to the guidelines which you have set up internally, or to one of these acts which is coming up and is coming up very rapidly. And so that's a product which we are building out. We use AI a lot to help creating these standard templates for across different acts, as well as to interpret the existing documents to answer these questions using AI. So it's a great productivity tool end to end. You can now map your assets, because having it's extremely important, because without that, you can't even classify which are high risk versus low risk. So we not automatically within your and provide you a map of all the models, data, and applications being used. We also create a map of all the controls which needs to be created around the different factors like robustness, security, fairness, bias, and according to the different standards. So that's one map part of the functionality. Then of course we do the measurement, like what is exist, what is self-attestation done by the models and data folks and the application developers, and how things change while the models are being and applications are being used. And then of course the mitigate part of the process where we help governance folks create incidents and cases and reports, and those can be then be used to manage the process of ensuring the company is confident about the solutions they are delivering or they are using within the organization.
Yeah, and who do you sell into? Because obviously there's legal compliance, but legal compliance is probably not, the CTO or the chief of, engineer or, part of the engineering team. There's that gap there, of knowledge, and you see it also on, the political side of the equation as well. And we there's a lot of that going on as well in terms of understanding both the legal and compliance, but building that legal and compliance framework with an understanding of the technology, which is kind of two different paths people go on in life. So who do you sell into, and how do you, I guess, bridge that gap for people?
Very, very important for us, because we have two-pronged approach. Like one is a top-down approach, and one is a PLG approach. So the top-down approach, we definitely want to help the legal and compliance folks with the structured way of creating the governance process. That itself is a big gap, because acts exist, people are getting the act, but how to convert that into something which is actionable within the organization, educate the organization about what they need to do, right from the point where they're trying to think about bringing out an AI application or procuring an AI app. And so that process, the setting up, so we help organize the legal compliance folks get this, the assurance label, software assurance label, not so, the AI governance assurance label can created automatically. That is where this is a top down. So they set the process. We help them author the process. We help them run the process. We help them get a real time view of how the company's AI posture looks like. But they cannot do that without the help of the stakeholders like the IT team or the data team or the engineering team or the AI and modeling team. But they themselves are already producing documents, and those documents are probably contain all the answers. They don't want them to answer this question every time a new act comes in, every time a new process to be run continuously, because these has to be audited and verified. So you have to do it over and over again, maybe every time a release happens. So there we are helping the folks reduce the friction by providing these guidelines upfront, so they know while they're producing the artifacts that they are complying to these guidelines to the best of their abilities, and also the documents they produce can now be automatically converted into to answer this question through AI. So essentially, we help collaborate between the stakeholders from the legal and compliance side of the house with the folks who are actually producing these artifacts, and through interactions through Slack and other ways in which you interact. But reduce the friction because you use AI to provide the answers automatically and keep it up to date, and without additional burden on the folks who are actually developing these applications and models and data sets.
Sure.
So the PLG push will be, sorry, and the other one side, the PLG pushes, we also have a developer version of it, where developers automatically start using it, and then they can provide the results and just can automatically, then can be pushed to the compliance side of the house, and the two sides can meet. The east and the west will meet. East and west never meets, kind of thing.
Well, look, we're going to end there. I wanted to give you a moment. Where can people listening find more about Konfer, more about you in general before we run?
Please visit our website, www.konfer.ai. Konfer is in Konfer, very simple. We have more information there. We have blogs. We have an ability to reach out to us. We would be happy to do individual presentations and demos. And we are looking for more and more people to use our product end to end and solve their governance and compliance problems ASAP. We'll help you structure your governance process. We'll help you operationalize it, and you will be compliant to the acts and standards that are coming up very soon.
Awesome. Debu, what a delight having you on here, talking all things AI. Obviously, you have a fascinating background and, someone that I think was, right to talk to for this topic. appreciate you coming on, and we'll talk in the future. And good luck.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you very much. And I loved talking about this, and I look forward to more people using Konfer.